You know, a standard chessboard is literally a perfectly bounded universe. It consists of exactly 64 squares, no more, no less. And within that strict grid, absolutely limitless possibilities exist. But the boundaries themselves are absolute. Welcome to this explainer, where today we're diving into the 64 squares, Bobby Fischer's rise and fall. We are going to explore the life of history's most brilliant and honestly most tragic chess genius. But we aren't just going to look at a standard timeline. No, we are going to step through his life square by square. And here is the profound, kind of eerie premise of our explainer today. Robert James Fischer lived for exactly 64 years. That's 1 year for every single square on the board that entirely defined his existence. To truly understand his unprecedented rise and his devastating fall, we're going to use this motif of counting from square 1 to square 64 to track his life chronologically. Each square represents a year, a move, a massive triumph, or a tragedy. Section 1. The opening, Brooklyn Prodigy. Let's start right at square 1. The year is 1949. A 6-year-old Bobby and his sister Joan buy a cheap plastic chess set from a local Brooklyn candy store. They pop open a small booklet of basic rules, and in that singular moment, a switch is flipped that would alter his life and the entire history of chess forever. Okay, let's fast forward rapidly across squares 2 through 15, where we literally watch a child transform into a machine. By age 7, his fixation is so incredibly intense that his mother is writing to the local paper begging for opponents. He meets Carmine Negro, his first mentor, and by 12, he's spending every spare hour he has at the elite Manhattan Chess Club. And then, the explosion. At 13, he plays a stunning queen's sacrifice against Donald Byrne, a move immortalized as the game of the century. By 14, he wins the U.S. championship undefeated against grown adults. And by square 15, at just 15 years old, he travels to Yugoslavia and becomes the youngest grandmaster in history. The big takeaway here, his absolute, uncompromising dedication. I mean, he actually taught himself Russian, Serbo-Croatian, Spanish, and German just so he could read foreign chess journals directly. Section 2. The middle game, absolute dominance. Moving through squares 16 to 23, Fischer becomes an unstoppable force. He wins every single U.S. championship he enters. 8 in total. The peak of this domestic perfection was an impossible 11-0 clean sweep in the 1963-1964 championship against the strongest masters in the West. But he was also fiercely principled. Outraged by what he saw as Soviet players colluding with quick draws, he completely boycotted international FIDE tournaments, retreating to study chess for up to 14 hours a day. Hitting squares 24 through 27, Fischer just goes on an absolute rampage. In the 1971 candidates matches, he defeats Soviet GM Mark Taimanov with a perfect 6-0 score. Unprecedented. Then, he turns around and does the exact same impossible thing to Bent Larsen, 6-0. He finishes off former world champion Tigran Petrosian, setting a historic 20-game winning streak against world-class grandmasters. By 1972, Fischer's relentless victories push his ELO rating to a monumental 2785. To put that into perspective for you, that record peak wouldn't be matched by anyone for decades. Section 3. The turning point, Reykjavik. We arrive at square 28, the 1972 World Chess Championship in Reykjavik, Iceland. This was no longer just a game. It was a massive Cold War proxy battle on a global stage. It was the lone, brilliant American stepping into arena against the vast Soviet chess machine, represented by reigning champion Boris Spassky. But getting him to actually sit at the board, wow, that was a battle in itself. Counting through squares 29 to 31, Fischer is completely paralyzed by his own demands. He refuses to fly to Iceland until a British millionaire doubles the prize fund, and U.S. National Security Advisor Henry Kissinger actually calls him on the phone. He loses Game 1 on a simple blunder, and then he straight-up forfeits Game 2 by refusing to play in front of cameras. Down 2-0, he demands Game 3 be played in a tiny, isolated back room normally used for ping-pong. Spassky, surprisingly, agrees. And in that small room, Fischer deploys an unpredictable opening, finally breaking the Russians' psychological edge. By square 32, we witness pure, absolute brilliance. In Game 6, Fischer plays a positional masterpiece so breathtakingly flawless that Spassky himself stood up and joined the audience in applauding his rival. Moving through squares 33 to 35, Spassky eventually resigns over the telephone. Bobby Fischer officially becomes the 11th world chess champion. This sparks a massive chess boom across America, turning a quiet intellectual game into a mainstream cultural phenomenon. And then, he just vanishes. He turns down millions in endorsements and completely retreats from the public eye. Section 4. The Blunder. Isolation begins. We hit squares 36 and 37. It's 1975. Fischer is scheduled to defend his title against young Soviet challenger Anatoly Karpov. But Fischer sends the governing body, FIDE, a list of 17 non-negotiable demands. When FIDE refuses his demand that the champion retains the title in the event of a 9-9 tie, Fischer does the unthinkable. He refuses to play. He resigns his title and forfeits the crown without moving a single piece. The sheer contrast here is tragic. At square 34, Fischer was a celebrated global icon and an American hero. But fast forward to square 38, and we find him spending the next 17 years living as an impoverished ghost in California. The sources detail a man slipping deeper and deeper into severe paranoia, profound isolation, and increasingly radical political views. The hero of 1972 had become entirely unrecognizable. Yet, even in the middle of all this, during squares 39 and 40, his unparalleled chess genius still flickered in the dark. To eliminate the memorization of home preparation, he patented Fischer Random Chess, a variant that shuffles the back rank pieces. He also invented the digital chess clock that adds a time increment after every move. Why does this matter to you? Because both of these innovations, born from his deep isolation, are fundamental standards used in almost every single competitive chess tournament globally today. His mind was still innovating, even as it was fractured. Section 5. The Endgame. Final Squares. The final, darkest phase of his life begins at square 41. It's 1992, and Fischer suddenly emerges from hiding. A wealthy local banker in Yugoslavia has organized a $5 million rematch against his old rival, Boris Spassky. The events spanning squares 42 through 51 read like a surreal thriller. Because Yugoslavia was under strict UN economic sanctions at the time, the US government explicitly forbade Fischer from playing. In response, at a televised press conference, Fischer literally spat on the official US Treasury warning letter. He won the match, bagging $3.35 million, but instantly became a permanent US fugitive. Drifting through countries without extradition treaties, he spent a lot of time in the Philippines. There, he utilized local radio to broadcast unhinged anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. And shockingly, on September 11, 2001, he called in to praise the terrorist attacks, destroying whatever public sympathy he had left. Finally, in 2004, he was arrested by Japanese immigration at Narita Airport for using a revoked passport, which resulted in 8 grueling months in a detention center while the U.S. fought for his extradition. So what happens at squares 52 through 56? Well, a pretty remarkable rescue. His legal team pleaded globally for asylum, and Iceland, remembering how this lone American brought their small nation to the absolute center of the world stage back in 1972, stepped up. Their parliament voted unanimously to grant him full, protective citizenship. Japan released him, and Fischer returned to Reykjavik. He spent his final years as a reclusive citizen with a heavy beard, spending peaceful afternoons tucked away reading history in a small secondhand bookstore. As we reach squares 57 to 61, things slow down. His health rapidly deteriorates. His lifelong paranoia caused him to reject all conventional medical testing in Western medicine for degenerative kidney failure, which, tragically, is a highly treatable illness. Yet his analytical mind remained razor-sharp, still able to visualize complex chess variations entirely in his head. Cared for by his devoted companion Miyoko Watai and his loyal friend Grandmaster Eugenio Torre, his final recorded words on his deathbed were simple and profoundly human. Nothing eases suffering like the human touch. Which brings us to the end, squares 62 through 64. He was laid to rest in a deeply private sunrise ceremony at a rural Icelandic church cemetery. His grave is marked by a simple stone slab in the windswept countryside. Robert James Fischer died on January 17, 2008. He died at the exact age of 64. A profound, poetic, and perhaps inevitable conclusion that perfectly matched the 64 squares on the chessboard that defined his entire existence. So the crucial point to reflect upon as we close this explainer is this. For a man who saw the entire universe within the boundaries of a chessboard, did the game of chess ultimately consume his mind, or for 64 years, was it the only thing holding it together? It's a terrifyingly fine line between supreme genius and tragic madness. Thank you for joining me to explore the 64 squares of Bobby Fischer. Keep analyzing, keep questioning, and I'll see you next time.